Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and we're going to start the program. And I just want to welcome everyone who's joined us today, or faculty, or students, or staff, or guests for this mini-conference as we launch our 3 schools. Before I invite to the podium our keynote speaker, I would very much like to invite Ms. Pat Gray, who is representing the Chancellery today, to bring greetings from the Chancellery. Please join me in welcoming her. Good.
Thank you. Hi, I will be brief. I want to thank you and say I am delighted to be here today to bring greetings from the Chancellor and to welcome President Howard, who is a graduate of Richmond College, which was a precursor of the College of Staten Island as we know it today. So she is one of our own. CUNY is very proud of your leadership, and we are well aware of the excellent importance of ASCU's work, and we look forward to hearing your concepts and insights today. I'm also here this morning because I acted as an emissary bringing over a letter from the Chancellor to Dr. Howard and to a copy to President Keyes. In the letter, the Chancellor indicated that he has appointed President Keyes as the liaison to the American Association of State Colleges and Universities for the City University of New York. So the timing of this appointment could hardly be better, and I'm very pleased to be making the announcement. The second thing I would like to add is that we are delighted to be able to say that a featured speaker at a very important upcoming event will be Dr. Howard. CUNY is hosting with our partners, the New York Times Knowledge Network, an important event on November 11th at the New York Times. The topic will be Investing in Futures, Public Higher Education in America. It is a particularly propitious time and timely topic given President Obama's recent announcement of the American Graduation Initiative and the funding for community colleges. And lastly, because this ties in so well with one of Dr. Howard's personal and professional interests, I would like to announce that President Keyes has accepted the role of chairing CUNY's Women's Leadership Conference, which will be taking place on November 20th. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, Pat. I want to just acknowledge our students. I see some students in the house. Are you over there? Yes? Yes? Good. All right. Welcome. And I want to also acknowledge a few other special guests. It is my real delight to welcome to York College for the very first time President Karen Gould, the new president of Brooklyn College, who came to CUNY from the California State University. Welcome, and we wish you the best. I'd also like to acknowledge the president of our very, very good friend, Dr. Richard Morris, professor of political science, and the executive director of the National Center of the Study of Collective Bargaining in Higher Education, one of the longest titles I've heard, but welcome, Richard. So, Dr. Howard, as we launch our schools in this forum today, I want you to know that you also join a distinguished group of women who've already visited us this semester. They include MacArthur Fellow Majora Carter, the sustainability guru from the South Bronx, who keynoted our convocation this year and also accepted an honorary doctorate. You join also Edwidge Dandicat, who was our distinguished lecturer in September, after which she too, like Majora Carter, was announced as a MacArthur Fellow. Elizabeth Nunes, our own Elizabeth Nunes, was here this week. She's a distinguished professor of literature, from Medgar Evers, who read from her most recent book, Anna in Between. And tomorrow, our students will open their 5-day run of the play Fabulation, and Lynn Nottage from Brooklyn, Pulitzer Prize winner, will be here tomorrow after the show to do a talk back. So you see, at York, we're actively engaged, and we're glad that you're here with us today. During the summer, Provost Griffith and I talked about this launch, and he gave me only one duty. He said, find me a keynote speaker. That was my duty. I had the privilege of spending a little time at Oxford this year, where VP Jones and I presented a paper, a group of women in higher education from all over the United States and Canada, and our topic was, don't just go to college, be the college, prospects and promise in the executive ranks of the academy. While there, I met a co-panelist who is a friend of Dr. Howard's, and we talked a bit about your new role. I, at the time, thought you were still in Buffalo, but she apprised me of the fact that you were taking on a national perspective. And so I thought it would be really great to be able to invite you to join us today as we launch this effort. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is how I came to put the call in and to identify Dr. Howard to join us. And she joins us here, and it is a bit of a homecoming, because Dr. Howard is a native, well, no, you're not a native of New York, as it were, having not been born here, but like most New Yorkers, you arrived and then you became a New Yorker, but grew up a few blocks down the road here in Jamaica and then moved to St. Albans, the Hollis area, is a graduate, as you've heard, of the City University of Richmond College, now Staten Island. She holds a master's degree in education and a doctor of philosophy in educational organization, administration, and policy from the University at Buffalo. She's also earned a certificate from the Institute for Educational Management at Harvard. As president of Buffalo State from 1996 to 2009, Dr. Howard led a campus of more than 11,000 students and approximately 1,700 faculty and staff, and a financial operation of more than $214 million. Prior to joining Buffalo State, she was the vice president for public service and urban affairs at the University at Buffalo, where she served in a number of capacities at the leadership level over a 23-year period. In April of 2009, Dr. Howard assumed the presidency of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. And just so you know, ASCU is comprised of over 430 public colleges and university members found throughout the United States, in Guam, in Puerto Rico, and in the Virgin Islands. She is the first African American to lead one of the 6 presidentially based higher education associations in Washington. She is also ASCU's first female leader. As you've heard, this partnership with this launch today has generated other partnerships, and we really look forward not only to what you will say to us today as we launch our 3 schools, but we look forward to your leadership on the national level. And now I have additional reasons to come to Washington. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Howard to the podium.
No, I think I'll be fine. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Marcia, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I want to thank all of our distinguished guests for being with us today, and also to thank Provost Griffith, all of the conference panel members, the faculty, staff, and students that are here. It's a special pleasure for me to be with you all today, and it's certainly an honor for me to be here to represent the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. As your president indicated, we are comprised of over 430 members, and we've just added our first international institution, and so the University of Liberia has just become a member of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. And there is a lot of work to be done in Liberia, so we are looking for faculty who are interested in traveling abroad and helping to rebuild the higher education system there in Liberia. I'll talk with Marcia more about that later. We also serve more than 4 million students and represent more than half of all the students who attend public four-year institutions. Our colleges and universities educate a very diverse group of students that include those that are from traditional and underrepresented populations. Among all public four-year institutions, ASCU schools educate approximately 57% of all minority students. This includes 48% of all African American students in the U.S., 56% of all Hispanic students, 52% of all Native American and Alaska Natives, and 42% of Asian and Pacific Islanders. We're also very diverse in size and location, and so if you just looked at the state of Florida, at the New College of Florida, they only have about 785 students, but the University of Central Florida has more than 50,000 students. And so we are concerned with colleges and universities that are urban, rural, suburban, and also those located across the water. So diversity is a big hallmark of ASCU, and so the things that we are most committed to are access, affordability, accountability, and competitiveness. And York College has put those values and that vision associated with ASCU into practice. You've always been committed to access and opportunity, and you have focused on students, and you have valued regional engagement as stewards of place. Moreover, what we're here to celebrate today, the trailblazing reorganization of your institution, makes it clear that York's 4 fantastic decades represent a forward-thinking approach that will serve students for many decades to come. As you've learned, I have many connections to this neighborhood, and I remember when York College began, and I was very excited about it. And so there are many familiar faces here today. As the president of Buffalo State College, I've of course known your president for a couple of, I won't say decades, but a very, very long time. And I've admired her leadership and ability for well over a decade. I was telling her this morning, I was on the ACE board when her presidency was being discussed, and I encouraged a friend to make sure that she had a good opportunity at this position. So I'm delighted that she's here and that she's going to be working closely with ASCU, representing the public institutions in the CUNY system. Not only am I a graduate of Richmond College, which is now known as the College of Staten Island, President Morales is trying to teach me to say I am a graduate of College of Staten Island. I'm also a graduate of New York City Tech Community College. I attended that institution shortly after I graduated from Martin Van Buren High School. And as you've learned, I grew up very close to here. I spent grades 4 through 8 in this neighborhood, about 10 blocks away from here. And my 84-year aunt still commutes back over here to attend our family church. So this neighborhood is still very important to me and my family. And it was wonderful, as a matter of fact, for me to be able to see a couple of my siblings last night. This was a wonderful neighborhood when I grew up. It was vibrant, but by no means was it wealthy. But I especially remember the corridor, which we call the Avenue, and I don't know if you still do, but that was where we all went shopping, especially on Saturdays, and we got special treats from our mother at Woolworth's. On the Avenue, and certainly in my immediate neighborhood, which was down around Union Hall Street and New York Boulevard area and 108th Avenue, then when I was a youngster, the whole neighborhood knew who we were. They looked out for you. They gave you the support you needed, whether it was advice, some financial help if your family was in tough times, or I specifically remember all the well-chosen words of encouragement as I would go back and forth to the store or to school, what the neighbors or the shopkeepers would say to me as we went in and out of those places. And so the whole neighborhood was important to me, and I believe was a part of my becoming who I am today. My parents, and especially my grandmother, played a big role in my life, and they taught me how critically important education is in the lives of young people. And my neighborhood taught me that young people need a supportive environment to thrive. Those lessons have guided me throughout my professional career. Those two lessons also explain one of the things I'm most proud of in my career, and that I had 13 years to help the students at Buffalo State College become a much more student-oriented and student-centered institution during my 13 years. While I had spent 23 years at a Research One at the University at Buffalo, it was certainly my experience at a four-year comprehensive where I really felt at home and that I was in my niche and I could truly help transform the lives of students as you're doing here at York College. And so I see my work as the president of ASCU as a continuation of that and a unique opportunity for me. The lessons I've carried with me are also why I'm truly thrilled to be a part of this meeting today. The changes you are putting in place will intensify York's focus on its students. Everyone can see that the reorganization has been carefully crafted to ensure that the more than 7,000 students here have the best learning experience possible. I believe one of the reasons your reorganization is so impressive is that I know that it has not been easy. Let's face it, change, and certainly strategic change, can be unsettling, especially for higher education, and there are good reasons for that. As Clark Kerr indicated, while the scholar is urged as an intellectual activity to challenge the paradigms in use, the practicing scholar is also tied to the tradition and the paradigms in use. And I'm sure that many of your planning discussions occasionally bumped up against these two paradigms more than once. In fact, you could fill whole shelves in the York College Library with sociology books on irrational resistance to organizational change. And I read some of those books when I was an undergraduate sociology major. But I acquired more insight into change just yesterday as I was able to walk around and drive through my own neighborhood. On the one hand, it was heartwarming, it was nostalgic, bringing back great old memories. But it also reminded me how different things have become since I've lived here. Stores and restaurants I knew are gone. The songs coming out of the radios and the programs on the TVs and the video stores are certainly different. To be honest, all of that change was a little worrisome because I wondered if the shopkeepers, the bus drivers, and the neighbors were still validating the young people in this neighborhood as they did me and my 5 siblings when we were growing up. Change can make a big difference, and that is why a lot of people fear it. That's also why I believe people spend a lot of energy overanalyzing change instead of simply trying to go with it and understand it. And that's what the popular book, Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson is all about. And so when I feel myself getting stuck, I sit down with that book and go through the maze again, and I recommend it to everyone who hasn't read it. And I especially recommend it to students. It was a text that I had my students to read when I taught leadership classes at Buffalo State College. It was always an eye-opener to them and really helped them to look at their studies in a different way. Here at York, you've also practiced what Clark Kerr once observed, in that the major test of a modern university is how wisely and how quickly it is able to adjust to important new possibilities. And so you've overcome the natural resistance to change. You've coped with higher education's specific and very powerful reluctance to change. and carved out a new paradigm here at York. And while tradition has helped universities at times, today, more and more, it's being viewed as a huge problem. And I believe that's because there's greater demand for us to do more with less. And also, there is an increase in greater demand for us to expand our missions to either further distinguish ourselves or to respond to regional and economic demands. Colleges and universities are being asked to take on a lot of the leadership responsibilities that other social institutions used to take on. And we're so good at this, and we have all these smart people here to help us think through things. We tend to try and be responsive because as educators, we know that education does transform lives, it does transform communities. About 15 years ago, two academics, Robert Barr and John Tagg, wrote an influential article pointing out that universities had tended to adopt what they called the instruction paradigm. You know that paradigm. Institutions see their mission as delivering 50-minute lectures in traditional disciplines. The authors had called for a shift to the learning paradigm, where universities helped every student learn through whatever means and what worked best. Ultimately, the instruction paradigm became the status and still remains the status at many of our colleges and universities. But I believe at York that is changing. From what I've read and talked with your president about, you are committed to students, to learning, and to real change. And I am here today to join in the celebration of what you have accomplished and to celebrate your unleashing what's possible. In the end, you decided not just to respond to change, but to help create it. To President Keyes, Provost Griffith, and all of you who have taken reorganization from a bright idea to reality, congratulations on a job well done. Now, I actually know how hard this is. I know you've worked long hours, you've had conference calls, emails, negotiations, compromises, and you've been through the highs and lows. And I can tell you there were times when your president wasn't sure what it looked like, that it was mushy at some times. And she probably called on the provost to help move it back in shape and to keep it moving forward. I know that because I took my institution through a similar experience where we moved into schools. And restructuring our academic disciplines into schools was not easy, but I am amazed at what my faculty and staff were able to do, and I'm amazed at what you have accomplished, and that is why you all look so relaxed and refreshed today, is because now that is behind you. It's also clear that York's changes include two key elements required to help make our institutions more student-centered. First, the reorganization will provide students the kind of extended nurturing they need to thrive through new opportunities for interactions with faculty, new forms of student research, and opportunities to integrate it into practice. In short, York's 3 new schools have the potential to be the academic version of the supportive neighborhood I thrived in growing up right here. In addition, the reorganization will help prepare students to succeed in the world they will enter as they leave campus. No matter what job a student takes in the future, whether it's in the arts, high-tech manufacturing, healthcare, business, or elsewhere, we all know that he or she will not experience the world in neat academic categories. As the former president of the American Chemical Society has said, it is a very basic fact of life in industry now. As technology evolves, as it gets more complicated and interesting and rewarding, making progress requires input from individuals skilled in a range of disciplines. The need to be interdisciplinary is even more urgent when you consider that today's young workers will change jobs 7 to 10 times during their careers. I was just visiting with my brother who is in healthcare, and at the age of 58, he just had to take on a new job. So I was trying to coach him as a senior worker how to move in and report to this very young person. He is not too happy. I can also tell you from personal experience that your reorganization will reap tremendous rewards well before your students make their way into the work world. I found that the reorganization at Buffalo State College stimulated new partnerships among faculty as they broke out of the straitjacket of their traditional disciplines. I know this is one of the areas that the heads of the new schools, Dr. Melatius, and I hope that's right, Dr. Fusco and Dr. Rosen, are especially excited about, since it will build on the pioneering efforts they have been trying to lead. I also know from experience that York's reorganization will lead to innovative forms of teaching and create new forms of research. In fact, I predict you're in for a wonderful period of progress and fruitful discoveries, some of which will really surprise you. Certainly at my institutions, it allowed my professors to feel very comfortable, and I felt my job was to make everyone feel comfortable about the change we were going through and to take away any fear in the environment. So I had faculty that actually requested to change departments, and we allowed for that. You could move from any department, you could move from any school, and to create and reinvent yourselves if you needed to, particularly some of our senior faculty whose work had moved in a different direction than when they started out early in their professorial career. And it was well accepted by the entire faculty and allowed them to come into departments where they had begun to develop informal relationships in terms of either teaching methodology or a shift in content. It also helped me to understand and hear their needs better. And so I reinvested and redirected my resources. I would cream off $1 million each year from the budget just for reinvestments into our strategic plan. One year, the money all went to technology, to upgrade, to get the databases on campuses that they needed within the library. Another year, as a matter of fact, that actually took about 3 years over time, we converted all of our common classrooms into smart classrooms because we didn't have a wonderful new campus like you have. Also, faculty would say, I need this piece of equipment that will improve my teaching, so they became more focused on what would improve their teaching. So I noticed that the faculty and staff became more interested in teaching. And also, there was a closer bond and working relationship that was developed between my student life staff and the faculty. For example, the Office of Career Placement and Planning was asked to take on and professionalize internships for the entire institution, which meant the faculty had to agree that I had to move resources there to make that happen. But it took a lot of the paperwork and other issues off of the desk of faculty, and we professionalized it. And so they worked very, very close together. We moved into service learning. We started an undergraduate research initiative that was a horizontal initiative that was led by one of our herb science faculty members. I gave her a leave for a year to go work at NSF to learn about how to really integrate undergraduate research into teaching so that all of our faculty, whether you were from the arts or sciences or from the professionals departments, how it could apply to your area. And it has been a tremendous success. And those are traditions that I know will continue long after I have left Buffalo State. Finally, you'll learn that Dr. Griffith does a good job of forecasting the future, at least when it comes to his prediction that the reorganization sets the stage for the vital fundraising and for the enhancement of York's image. And that's a quote. My experience is that changes like the ones you have made will inspire alumni, raise your profile, and lead to stronger support within the community. Now let me make a forecast about the future. I predict that your reorganization will succeed beyond your wildest imaging if you will go with it. Why? Because in creating the 3 new schools, you have chosen well. Each includes a mix of disciplines that will be a catalyst for achievement. Each has a dynamic leader, and each is organized around a central core that is vitally important to your students, to the faculty, to the staff, to the administration, to the region, to CUNY, and to the nation. Take the new School of Business and Information Systems, which will be under the direction of Dr. Rosen. When he started planning for this school, how did he know that by October 2008, we'd be facing an historic meltdown, one which would change the way average citizens and academics think about business and information forever? And more importantly, why didn't he tell the rest of us that it was going to happen? Seriously, the need for your new school for business and information and training and research has never been greater. The same can be said for your new School of Health and Behavioral Sciences, led by Dr. Fusco. Healthcare has never been more important, from the continuing fight against cancer and other deadly diseases, to fighting childhood obesity, to finding new ways to treat America's aging population. And it has also never been more expensive. National health spending is expected to reach $2.5 trillion in 2009, accounting for nearly 18% of the gross domestic product. And it has never been more controversial. We are working on important bills in education in Washington, but you would not know it because everything is focused on healthcare. And so this new school will make a difference and will have a long future in terms of preparing students to help us as we take on a greater focus and concentration of healthcare. And the School of Arts and Sciences, led by Dr. Melatius, when you think about the serious challenges the world faces, I believe most will require solutions that combine science and technology with insights from politics, psychology, and the arts. Most of them will require solutions that are not only high-tech, but also high-touch. That is why we require our students to know something about communication, how to communicate effectively in speaking and by speaking and in writing. And so in terms of getting the economy moving again, protecting the environment, promoting social justice, all of these and other goals require people who can not only debug a computer program, but can also isolate problems, analyze data, and test ideas. In short, they require exactly what the School of Arts and Sciences will provide: problem solving and critical thinking skills. Let me close by saying, as I stand here in front of you today, I believe York is a vibrant 50-acre campus that is home to students from 50 countries, taught by award-winning faculty and led by exceptional administrators and staff and faculty dedicated to the development of students into global citizens. It is a little hard to believe that at about the time I lived here, York had only 371 students and a full-time instructional staff of 50 in a rented space in Bayside. The reasons you have come so far and risen so high in 4 decades can be illuminated by something President John F. Kennedy once said: "Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or the present are certain to miss the future." The reorganization shows that York not only looks to the future, you plan for that future and move into it boldly. Dr. Keyes, you could have rested on your laurels. You could have been satisfied that high school principals no longer think York is a community college, that student enrollment, achievement, and retention have increased, that your revamped library now boasts the latest technology, and about 75 new faculty members have been brought on board since 2005. Instead, you demonstrated that York's leaders take seriously one of Gandhi's most famous maxims: be the change you want to see. Many institutions want to meet their students' needs better. Many want to raise their academic profile. Many want to do an even better job of fulfilling their mission. But York College is getting it done. Congratulations, and thank you for inviting me today.
Visionary, experience-based, nostalgic. We got it all in one package.
She's an English professor, right?
It's fabulous. And we want to give, before we go to lunch, which is, and then the panel, and this is really such a wonderful kickoff for us. We want to give the audience an opportunity maybe for one or two questions, if you like, of Dr. Howard before we move to the second phase of our discussion today. I know it always happens. The first question is always a little difficult, right? Nobody? Yes? Oh, I thought I saw a hand. Okay, well, if there are no questions.
Well, let me just say and remind you all that we are in very difficult budget times. So don't go ask the president for $1 million to start reinvesting.
Yeah, maybe I would ask something, if I might, around, you mentioned, of course, I want to look sort of at the big picture for a little bit. You mentioned, and you're in Washington, so, we have a Washington person. It would be good to get a perspective. You mentioned, of course, that, yes, everything is focused right now on health and healthcare. But from your perspective in Washington and knowing what you know and knowing what ASCU is pursuing, what can we expect around higher education, especially for an institution like ours, coming maybe 6 months down the road or a year? If you could give us a little something that we could have a head start on, would you?
Well, I think you'll be interested to hear what Secretary Duncan has to say about how colleges and universities are preparing teachers and what he has to say about what's going on in K through 12. And he will be in New York in early November to deliver a major talk at Columbia University. So you will get some information about that. And I think what he says will be important, and we should pay attention. I think this administration is focused on the right issues in education. And the challenge is going to be, we have the right focus. The president is interested in putting resources behind that focus, but how do we get things aligned? Because as he is saying, we must increase the number of college graduates by 2020. And he wants all of higher education to buy into that goal with him. How will we be able to accomplish that goal when our cities and our states have less resources to support us? So that's a little bit out of line. But there is an important bill that is traveling. It got through Congress, and it's now in the Senate. And the Senate will probably get to this bill as soon as they can figure out the health care bill in agreement. So the education bill is still traveling, and we're still working on it. And today we should get a peek at what the bill is saying that's coming out of the Senate so we can help shape it. Part of my role is to certainly influence policy, and I will tell you, it's been a shock to see the bills that have come out because they're mostly being written by our outstanding graduates that are about 20-something. And have no experience in education. So some of the things that they suggest that we should be doing in higher education, I and others have to go in and wade in and say, wait a minute, this makes no sense. This is not how our industry works, and this is not how the teaching and learning experience certainly works. So we will try and reshape the bill. There is a lot of money traveling on this bill, and the reason I say this administration gets it because there is a college and access and completion portion of the bill where there will be several $100 million directed at this initiative. And it's directed to colleges and universities who have a commitment and a vision to serve first-generation students, underrepresented minority students. So that bill is and they're trying to allow a lot of flexibility so campuses can approach it different ways. You can use the money to help students pay off their loans or their debt. You can use the money to start new programs to support academic initiatives or student service functions. So I think being ready to have a really strong proposal so that you can compete is quite important. Whether the money will pass through the state, or my preference is that the money pass directly to the university. Whether we will get our way on that is the big issue that we are arguing with government about. I think the states are just a little bit unpredictable about whether MICEA would actually get the money or whether they would use it to fill some of the holes. So we are advocating that the money go directly, pass through the states is okay, but go directly to the colleges and universities so that the money gets in your hands and butts up against the students. So that's something that we are working on. And I think it's probably the most important initiative now that's going on in higher education. This administration does get it. In order for President Obama to reach that goal of having 5 million more graduates by 2020, the pool of students that you can go to are either students from underrepresented and underserved populations or first-generation students, because wealthy families already complete their education at about 77 to 80%. So there aren't many students there that they can go to get their goal met. But why is the goal important? The goal is important because the United States has to become competitive. We really rank about 15th in the nation now in terms of graduates. Your president just talked about, coming from the round table in Oxford. I spent some time last year in Korea. It's important for us to get over and visit and talk with these countries. And Korea invited me and 3 other presidents over to look at their system to help them figure out how they can make it stronger, because they said, our goal is to become competitive with the United States in higher education. We are hoping that your great-grandchildren will have a choice of saying, I'd like to study in Korea as opposed to studying in their community or the United States. Same thing in Australia. So the other countries where in the past the United States was seen as the place where you go to study abroad, they want your children, your great-grandchildren, to see their countries as a place to study. And so we must become competitive also to certainly keep our gross economic production up as well so that we can remain a healthy and viable and free nation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Howard. I know you will stay with us for the panel, I think. Yes, good. So great. So is it time, Provost? I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Don't you think she deserves another round of applause? Before I turn it over to our Director of Program Management, Project Management, to talk about how we're going to do the food, Dr. Howard, I want you to know that we've got a tradition at York that, the gift bag, that we don't allow guests, even guests who are returning home, to come and leave without a little gift. You have provided us with a wonderful gift of discourse on change, discourse on innovation, discourse on possibilities, and I love you use one of my O words, opportunities. This year I have 3 O's. Opportunities, ownership, and outcomes. Somebody's listening. Thanks, Donna. And you mentioned one of my 3 O's. Before you leave, you have to mention 2 others, Muriel, ownership and outcomes. We thought it would be good for you to have, as a small token of our appreciation, something from us. We know that winter is coming and blizzards are coming, and then the spring comes with rain. So just in case, you have an umbrella to cover yourself.
Thank you, and it does rain a lot in D.C., unexpectedly.
We know that you may want to go walking sometimes, and you don't want to mess the hair up too much, but you want to cover the hair. We have a cap for you. But we're also delighted to share with you an intellectual product of one of our faculty who have collaborated with colleagues elsewhere. There is a colleague called Mark Schuler. Is Mark in the house? He's teaching. Mark was able, along with a couple of other colleagues across the nation, to put together a wonderful documentary on Haitian women in the context of globalization, Potomitan. We had one of our provost lectures in the spring that was capacity fill, where he did a premiere of that documentary, and it's now available nationwide and internationally. And I thought we would be delighted if you would take the trouble of looking at Potomitan and sharing it, not only because it will bring royalties for the organization for Mark, but also because it's a valuable intellectual product that's a reflection of the things that our faculty here at York do. Delighted to give this to you. But to have a conversation in the context of a Q&A. Even if you're like Dean Gibson, who just arrived less than a month ago, one of the new arrivals in Division of Student Affairs, or whether you're like Paul Althouse, who's been here for several years, one of our veteran faculty, everyone, I think, would agree that York is in a transformative space. And the establishment of our 3 schools, and you'll see the posters there, Arts and Sciences, Business and Information Systems, Health and Behavioral Sciences. The establishment of the 3 schools is just one addition, one new feature of the transformative space in which we find ourselves as a college. But as I've mentioned to a couple of colleagues, most recently at our labor management meeting yesterday, for me, the school design is not an end in itself. The school design is intended to help us think of how we might facilitate innovation, how we might pursue excellence, how we might facilitate innovation, pursue excellence in our core enterprise. Our core enterprise being teaching and learning, research, and service. The questions about how we might facilitate innovation requires us to ask what new things, what different things might we own, embrace, what new degree programs, what changes in the existing menu of offerings might we modify in the interest of providing better services to our students. We might also be mindful of the importance of asking about what new research opportunities might we pursue within disciplines, across disciplines, within schools, between and among schools. Not only because of the importance of research as a way of creating new knowledge, but of the importance of research connected to teaching. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I know many colleagues will have read Ken Bain's book, What the Best College Teachers Do. And one of the important things that Ken Baines emphasizes is that no colleague and the faculty can afford to think of being an excellent teacher and neglect research. There's a link between teaching excellence and research engagement, the students being the beneficiaries of that engagement. So as we think of what innovation we might pursue, what things we might do anew, let's not forget the importance of research as an enterprise, but research connected to teaching so that the value added for the students can be there. I was delighted to hear President Howard talk about the research for undergraduate students. That's one of the things that we are going to be embracing fully this year at York. It's good to see President Gold at the table, because I was sharing with some colleagues at UNI Central yesterday in the Academic Council that I recently received and reviewed the biennial report of the Council on Undergraduate Research, where I was the leader for several years in Florida. And I was looking through the listing of organizations of members. The only CUNY school that is a member of CUR is Brooklyn College. York College will be CUNY school number 2 this year. And I'm delighted to share with you the fact that, I don't know if he's in the room, that I received an email last night from Professor Rishi Nath accepting my invitation for him to be our first Director of Undergraduate Research, Rishi Nath. But it's important that we think of what may be outcomes, opportunities, ownership in relation to service. How might we have the nexus between service and learning to benefit the output of learning, but how might we have innovation in service to have a value added in the quality of life in Queens, in the communities in which we serve? The premise of this whole pursuit is that we are not comfortable simply being good. Being good is not good enough. We need to be pursuing excellence. And as one of the things that you might recall, some of you who read my email, whether 10 o'clock or 10 p.m., 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., I have at the bottom of my email a little sentence from Aristotle. And one of the things that Aristotle reminds us is that excellence requires habituation. It's not simply a one act. It's not simply an event. Excellence then requires us to be habituated, practicing, not simply being comfortable with achieving one act that can be defined as excellence. And as you'll notice in the program, we've got on the front page, I think, a very useful quote from Michelangelo. And he reminds us that if you're going to be thinking of excellence, the greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high, and we miss it. The greatest danger for many of us is that we aim too low and we reach it. Our intent at York is not to be able to reach those lows. I said to the faculty who were at the reception early this week, for research, don't go simply for the low-hanging fruit. We are not interested simply in the low-hanging fruit. We want to be able to aim high, to stretch ourselves to pursue excellence. So yes, we're in a transformative space. We're in a transformative space that allows us to think of what opportunities we might pursue in teaching, research, and service. We're in a transformative space that allows us to think of what we might own and what outcomes we will want to have at the end of the journey. Outcomes that we can celebrate, outcomes that we can evaluate, outcomes that can be used to motivate our students and our faculty. The conversations about outcomes, about ownership, about innovation is not a conversation that will begin and end here. But we thought it would be useful to have a formal beginning of the conversation. We're going to be having those conversations continue. I've asked each of our deans to think of and prepare 3-year development plans for your schools. We'll have a chance to talk about those draft plans in January when we have our academic leadership retreat. But I'm hoping that the conversations continue within schools, within departments. I've been visiting departments asking for the conversations to be local. What might you do differently in your department on teaching, on research, on pedagogy? How might you embrace what we do? I'm delighted that to lead the formal conversation here today is a distinguished group of colleagues on the faculty, the students, and the administrator side. What I'll do is simply introduce them all as a group. Afterwards, I'll invite each of them to spend 5 to 8 minutes. That in academic terms means maybe 9.5 minutes. But we have a virtual hook. Rob has a hook. He's going to pull you off the stage if you go beyond 8.5 minutes. And after each of the presenters will have spoken, I'd really welcome us engaging in the conversation. Conversation about opportunities for innovation, how we might own those opportunities, not just point to someone else to do them, and how we might have achievements, outcomes that we can celebrate. So let me turn to the members of the panel. I'll introduce them in the order in which they will speak. After all the introductions are done, we'll invite them to come up and make their presentations. I want to first introduce Jasmine Calizea, class of 2011. Jasmine was born and raised in Brooklyn. She's majoring in speech communication education. Jasmine is one of our Thurgood Marshall Scholars. She's also the vice president of the Future Teachers Club. But she's not comfortable with a journey that ends at York. She plans upon graduating to go on to get her master's degree in speech pathology. Jasmine. We will then hear from Dr. Leslie Keiler from the Teacher Education Department. Leslie earned her bachelor's and master's degree in biology from Stanford. It was followed by a master's in secondary education at Teachers College, and she went then afterwards to pursue her doctorate in educational research at the University of Oxford. Her teaching includes teacher education methods course in science. She also teaches a general biology course. Leslie's research focuses on improving teaching and learning of science. She also is interested in professional development of secondary and university-level educators. Leslie is actively involved in grant-sponsored research, 2 NSF grants she's involved in right now, working to improve high school science and math instruction in urban classrooms. After Leslie, we'll hear from Gerry McNeil. Gerry McNeil is chairman of the biology department. Where's Gerry? Gerry's over there. Okay. Gerry has the way of trying to sneak out from me sometimes. I got to be sure that I know where he is. Gerry earned his PhD in molecular genetics from the University of Massachusetts Medical School. He then went on to Tufts University School of Medicine for postdoctoral training. Gerry came to York in 2001 and has continued working on the fruit fly. His research has been, fruit fly is very important to Gerry and other people in the biology department. If you see a fruit fly, don't kill it. Gerry will get mad at you. He will smack you. Fruit flies are very important to Gerry. Gerry's research has been funded by the NIH, and he's published in a variety of journals, including Neuron, Science, Genetics, Developmental Genetics, Journal of Neuroscience, Genesis, and a journal called Development, Genes, and Evolution. After Gerry, we'll hear from Dean Harry Rosen. Harry earned his bachelor's from the University of Pennsylvania, his master's in science from Columbia, and his PhD from Cornell. He was formerly professor of management in the Zicklin School of Business at Baruch, where he served for 13 years as department chair. A nationally recognized expert in healthcare management, he has co-authored the book, The Consumer and the Healthcare System, and he has published numerous articles in several scholarly journals. A former associate dean at the Zicklin School, Harry also received Baruch's Presidential Award for Excellence in Teaching, and he is board president of an organization called Care for the Homeless, a non-profit organization. Then after Harry will have spoken, we'll hear from Debra Swoboda. Deb is a psychologist, associate professor of psychology, and she's also director of our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Deb also serves as one of the co-chairs of our Gen Ed Reform Task Force. Her research focuses on the social construction of contested illnesses. She also is interested in public understanding of the new genetics. She has published in a variety of journals, including Health and Qualitative Research in Psychology. But you may also be interested in knowing that Deb will be the second fall Provost distinguished lecture speaker. On Monday of next week, she will be giving a lecture on the subject, How Do Contested Illnesses Become Public Health Concerns? The poster is someplace around. I'm delighted to introduce our panelists to you. I'm delighted as well to invite to be their first presenter, Jasmine.
Thank you, Provost Griffith. Great afternoon, everyone. Allow me to extend my greetings to President Keys, Provost Griffith, and our guest speaker on today, Dr. Howard, and to everyone that are here this wonderful afternoon. As a student of York College, there are a few things I would like to see better, our academics and student life. First, I would like to see a 5-year bachelor-master's program exist in our education department. As a student who concentrates on education, fulfilling the credits along with major credits can be overbearing. So having this program will not only excite our education students, but increase the student population for that area. Second, I would like to see more and better resources available for the student population. Currently, the resources we have available seem not to accommodate more than half of our students, which can be discouraging. And last, have an official lounge area for the students will be great. A lounge area that has resources available and space to relax during breaks can motivate students to take advantage of opportunities that are present in York College. Specifically, a student union is needed to capture the voices of the students that exist. With these 3 major views of what I believe should exist in York College, our students can be more involved on our campus. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The Provost asked me to think and talk about the possibilities that the new school structures will have on research by faculty and others on our campus. So that's the topic I'm addressing today. The schools model creates a novel structure for York College that draws new borders around us and our work. As borders tend to do, these schools divisions create an us and a them perspective. However, this identification does not need to be framed in the negative way that such dichotomies usually are interpreted. The us and them identification can be a useful tool to examine the possibilities as well as challenges posed by the school structure as we consider our research agendas. One way to explore the potential of the school's model to advance our research is to look within the borders of our schools, to see who exactly us is. Many of us are so used to thinking about our work within our department structures that examining this alternate us could open new possibilities. One area that holds strong potential for collaboration with us is the scholarship of teaching and learning. As we look at the desired outcomes and instructional pedagogies that exist within the courses in our schools, we're likely to see overlaps and opportunities that we never knew existed. Another possibility for collaboration within our schools lies in combining research agendas with the college-wide assessment initiative. For example, within the School of Health and Behavioral Sciences, faculty could examine the impact that graduates from a range of programs are having on communities of English language learners. We could explore the ways in which our alumni are advancing social justice agendas across their professional practice. Possibilities are bounded only by our creativity and resourcefulness. In addition to looking within our schools for collaborators among us, the school structure can highlight ways in which our research could be enriched by them. By defining our commonalities within schools, we make public and explicit the areas of expertise that exist within our borders and the possibilities of drawing on expertise that exists outside. Looking at the expertise that exists within other schools could provide inspiration for new directions to take our research. For example, I was recruited to join the research team of an NSF grant by the PIs who were both chemistry professors. This was because I do this strange thing called qualitative research. Although embedded in their own very quantitative perspectives about what data is and what data should be, these researchers took the risk of adding a new perspective to their program, which has enriched their findings and made their next grant application much stronger. In contrast, those of us in the health and behavioral sciences could strengthen our grant applications by reaching across the borders to the School of Business and Information Systems to analyze potential economic impacts of our proposed programs. Help is there that we never knew we needed. While collaboration presents substantial benefits, it comes with significant challenges as well. In general, true collaboration tends to be more time-consuming than solo work, as research methodologies, interpretations of data, and wording of articles need to be negotiated between equal peers. Further, learning from collaborators from across a border can make us feel vulnerable, as we feel exposed in areas of ignorance and weakness within our own experience and expertise. We're used to pushing back borders within our own field, but stepping sideways across a previously unperceived border can make us feel as if we're losing ground in developing expertise. This certainly has been the case in my collaboration with Dr. Linda Herrera. Over the past year, we've developed a strong collaboration, but that's exposed significant areas of ignorance for both of us, hers in science and mine in the experience of English language learners. Would my research have been more efficient if I had collaborated with another science educator? Probably. But the vital insights that we developed together at this border of our areas of expertise has provided rich and exciting results that wouldn't have been discovered if we hadn't taken these risks. Other risks are involved in pursuing collaborations, as we do not know how the products of such partnerships are valued in the tenure process. As new faculty, we're warned not to rely too heavily on our graduate school research team to make sure that our portfolios include solo work and to show independence and innovation. In this light, we're unsure of how new partnerships will be viewed. Will we be seen as innovative as we cross traditional borders in creating research partnerships, or are research agendas interpreted as being not focused? Other borders that should be considered as we think about border crossing are those between students, them, and researchers, us, between teaching and research. While some of our colleagues, particularly those in sciences, already incorporate students into their research process, many of us have yet to find ways to do this in a meaningful way. At one of my former universities, a fellowship program supporting collaborative summer research between faculty and students was so successful that it ran out of money. At that institution, publications with students were rated more highly than solo publications or publications with peers, even if the venue was less prestigious. However, while many of us saw undergraduate research as a way to accelerate our research agendas, we soon learned how time-consuming this endeavor can be. As with SOTL, the institution struggled with how to define this work along the research and teaching border, unsure how to value teaching that was on a one-on-one experience or research that had yet to result in publication. Departments dealt differently with counting faculty research in collaboration with students. Was this teaching? Was this service? And departments dealt with it differently, creating conflict across those borders. I'm excited about our highly reviewed undergraduate research program that's integral to the Robert Noyce Scholarship Grant. However, as implementation approaches, I feel a certain sense of trepidation about the practicalities having to do with this endeavor. If York is going to pursue the possibility of a flourishing undergraduate research program across the college, the schools must collaborate to meet the challenge of developing equitable ways of supporting, counting, and measuring success of this endeavor. Thus, the new school structure creates both possibilities and challenges for us as we move forward with our research agendas. If we're going to take advantage of the possibilities and meet the challenges successfully and productively, we must be prepared to take risks, to work outside the usual borders of our research programs and experience the discomfort of becoming novices and learners. In order to do this, we must have a safe space and time in which to conduct this work. New structures and new research approaches that exploit these structures require a reevaluation of traditional measures of research success. The process of growth in new areas must be valued along with the products of this growth. The increased time required of collaborative research efforts must be part of the equation as we calculate productivity expectations. The time and attention required of mentoring students in research process must be given appropriate weight if it is to become an integral part of our academic lives. We stand on a border between our past identity as York College and our new identities as members of schools within York College. Crossing this border can be a meaningful marker of growth in the history of this institution, or it can be a meaningless structural shift in organizational charts. The choice of whether to explore the possibilities and meet the challenges is ours. Thank you.
I'm going to be a lot less eloquent than that, but I'm a scientist, so that goes along with the. So what I was asked to do today is to try to tell you something about new pedagogical approaches the Department of Biology is using to teach students. And clearly, science is one of the disciplines in which lecturing has strong roots. I was taught by a lecturer style. My instructors were taught by lecturing style, and so by darn it, my students are going to learn by lecturing style. But what we're beginning to find out is if we look at students as they progress, they're not learning. So we need to maybe not get rid of lecturing, but perhaps substitute other ways or pedagogies to try to enhance student learning. And so we are trying to do that in the department. And I will outline a few ways or strategies that we've used or beginning to use to try to do this. And I want to keep in mind these are not new or novel. These are, a lot of these strategies have been used in other disciplines, but not less so in science. So we're trying to adapt them to science, specifically biology. One of them is using case studies, which has been used in business and medicine and law for years and years and years, but not so much only in the last 10 years or so in science. And so basically the idea is case studies can be used either to replace lecturing, and we have had instructors, Dr. McNeil in our department has used it in place of lecturing in a upper division course. And Dr. Simon and myself are trying to use it as kind of a related activity along with lecturing in our gen ed courses. And the way it works is you present a case study that relates to the topic. For instance, you're talking to a bunch of non-majors about dominance and recessive alleles. And they look at you like you're looking at me right now. Why? I don't care, I will never care, and you can't convince me to care. However, if you tell them, well, if you pose a case study, for instance, John's mother is dying of Huntington's disease, okay? They become worried. The question arises, what is the disease all about? And the gene has been cloned, and now you can be tested to see if you have the disease. And Huntington's disease possesses itself in a dominant fashion, so if you get one bad allele, you will get the disease, and it's also a late onset disease, so perhaps be normal phenotypically through 40, and then after 40 you start going downhill. So the question is, do you, if you're John or the siblings, do you want to be tested Do you want to know? And not only can they tell you if you're going to have the disease, they can tell you when you're going to get it and perhaps when you might die.
Am I going to get it?
So the question is, this becomes, so you pose this to the class, and they become very interested in it, and then they can learn about why a particular allele is dominant, what the probability of you getting that as a sibling. So it becomes very engaging in the class. So the idea is lecturing, we're standing up here, you're listening, and there's very little interaction. Maybe you pose a few questions. However, this allows a lot more interaction, and a lot of the class is dictated by the student's response. So it becomes very useful. And we're learning how to, you really need to learn how to present this in an effective way. Another approach that we're trying is called inquiry-based learning. And I'll give you an example of how this works. Dr. Beaton used this in biology of plants. Biology of plants. Very exciting. I work with fruit flies, so, you know, for some people, plants are exciting. And so the way you would normally do it, perhaps, is you'd go up there and you talk about the structure of plants. These are the roots, these are the stems, these, etc. The way she did it instead was she'd have a topic structure of a plant. And instead of saying, you know, this is a plant, this is a structure, what she posed was, she posed a problem or a situation for them. Okay, what I want you to do is design a plant that would flourish in an urban environment. And she'd break it up into groups. And what they would have to do is they'd have to design the plant. Of course, they're coming in not knowing much about how a plant operates, what the structure is. She gives a brief introduction to the topic, and then they learn on their own in groups. So they figure out what they need, they go research it, they come back, learn from each other, and it's very effective. However, do you think the students like this approach? No. Matter of fact, one student came up to me and said, excuse me, I have this professor that's teaching this way, and it's just unacceptable. I said, I came to college to sit there, be taught, and go home. And now this instructor is expecting me to come to class and figure it out on my own. She's getting paid to do that. And in fact, what happens is as you go through and near the end, they actually appreciate what they did, because when they come up with their plan, they present it in class or in a poster or whatever, it's their work. They figured it out. And so they get a lot more out of it. And hopefully that will you know, it's perhaps better, more effective in upper division courses. So we're trying that. One of the other things we're trying is how to, currently we have classrooms, and in lab sections for classrooms, you have preset experiments. You do them, we all know how they're going to turn out. And in the research laboratories, the students are working on independent research where we don't really know what's going on. However, there's not that many laboratories, and we want to figure out a way to increase exposure of students to independent research. So what I'd like to do is bring research, independent research, into the classroom, if you can, where we're doing experiments that we don't know the outcome. So about 2 years ago, I joined a group called the Genomics Education Partnership, which is funded by Howard Hughes Medical Institute and is centered at Washington University. And what they do is the people there are interested in Drosophila fruit fly genomics. Got me interested. And what they want to do and what it's funded for is to increase exposure of undergraduate students to genomics and provide new opportunities for students, undergraduate students, to participate in independent research. And so currently there are over 50 undergraduate universities across the country involved in this, including York, and City College has joined. My goal is to get the other colleges involved, part of City University of New York, so we can have our own cohort. And so what this is we all the students in these different institutions take a part of an overall genomic project. They get a little piece of DNA where they got to figure out where the genes are, if they're real genes or not. And then all that work goes back to Washington University. They put it together and they publish a research paper. So it's very effective, and that's all you need is a computer and an internet to do that. So what, and another nice thing about it is you can incorporate it in independent study or in as a sole source for a course like bioinformatics, or you can use it as a piece or 1 or 2 or 3 laboratory sessions in an existing class. So, and the nice thing about it is students were we're giving quizzes in response for assessment, and basically what we found was that they found this to be as good a research experience as those students who do a summer undergraduate research project. And that comparison was published in Science last year. So this is one way that we are bringing independent research, something that we don't know about, to our students. And there'll be a paper published in genome biology next year, which will include at least 10 York students as authors. So it's a wonderful program, and I'm hoping it's up for refunding. So I hope it's going to be refunded. I think it will be. So this is just a few. There are others. This is a few the types of things that we're trying to do to either, in some cases, replace lecturing, or in other cases, supplement lecturing, trying to engage the students more with the faculty. And these can be done even in large classes, as Leslie has taught me. I never thought that a class of 55 you could group people. But Leslie taught one of the biology classes, and the first day she went in, and I was there just to make sure she got there, and she was grouping the people on the first day. And I'm like, what is she doing? And I talked to her afterwards, and I said, what are you doing? This is science. You can't do this. It's not education. She has actually taught me that, yeah, you can do it. And I'm doing it now, which is quite surprising. Yeah, so. The students don't really like that either. And I couldn't get into too much detail about these, but all the different things we're doing are going to be presented at CETL over the next academic year. Thank you.
Obstacle course here. Good afternoon. I want to thank, first of all, President Keyes and Provost Griffith for the privilege of being part of this very distinguished group, sharing a podium with President Howard. By the way, the next time there is a glitch in the American economy, I got a promise for you. You will be the second person to know. I'd like to talk to you about innovations in business education, and I think I need to start a little bit with the history of business in universities, which may surprise you. Business was not welcome in universities. At Harvard, there was a battle royal to get it started. And the objection was, as you might expect, this is trade school stuff. We don't do that in universities. Now, by the way, as Gerry may know, that was the same fight with medicine. Medicine was considered trade. We don't do that stuff at Harvard and Penn and Yale and every place else. Well, the battles were won. Schools of business began. And pedagogy at that time was very orthodox, the classroom stuff that you'd expect. Then, through the past century, the worst fears of the critics were borne out. The trade school stuff began to work its way into business curricula. As Provost said, I served as an associate dean at the Zicklin School at one point, and I had an opportunity, because someone asked, to find an old transcript from the 1950s. By the way, it was a work of art. It was penmanship was written in. I remember it very well. It was a finance major, and I looked at the courses and I was jolted. One of the courses was how to trade in petrochemicals, how to trade in pulp, paper, and lumber. That's trade school stuff. And business school pedagogy, and in fact, its whole objective had, in my opinion, had gone downhill. 1959, the Carnegie Commission, that has done so much for education, came out with a rather scathing report accusing us, schools of business, of just that, and said that we had to reintroduce the rigor with which we began. Well, they did, and my faculty at Cornell described what that period was like. Rigor came back, the flip side of which is mortis. And couple of my faculty said, Harry, back then, the worst thing you could be is relevant. It was appalling. Well, Gerry mentioned the case studies that have been part of business. The major introduction of case studies began in the mid-'60s at Harvard. You heard my tickets. That doesn't please me, but it's there, so I guess we got to use it. But here's a couple things about cases. My colleagues are with me. We're going to use them more and more, but cases, we found, are about questions. They're not about answers. And one of the problems we face as business school faculty is we have colleagues, we have graduates who are successful, and they say, Harry, I can do a case for you about the last new service line that I introduced. And what always happens is it's a class session where the students are asked to try to beat the business person to their own punchline. Now, students tend to like it, but it's not good learning. And so the orthodoxy that began with the Harvard case method, which actually is very good, give the devil his due, requires that a case study, first of all, be accompanied by an instructor's note that describes to the user ultimately how the decision process is to be developed. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to give good examples of good stuff, although that's not a bad thing either. But the point is to instill in the students, get them to think through a rational decision-making process. And like, as Gerry said, it's hard, right? I mean, using case method is a lot harder than just standing up and lecturing. So that's why it hasn't had the uptake. Let me give you an example. You all remember when the Enron problem broke, right? Investigative journalism, the press, they were all over it. And our students in a course that I taught in business ethics and corporate accountability, students said, we need to talk about Enron. But there were no cases, right? There was the investigative journalism, there was the backlash, there was everything else. So my colleague, Don Chubbers, and I sat down, we've got to write a case. And this may interest you too. At this point in the business field, I don't know in other disciplines, but there are journals, peer-reviewed journals, devoted to business cases. We submitted there. One of the interesting things is when I presented it as our sort of beta site, I found out that the financial manipulations were at the core of the problem, were beyond the ken even of my finance major. So one of the things we had to go back and do to get it published was to write a small finance primer about the peculiarities of that. So we're continuing to develop cases, but that's why we're continuing to develop them, to develop a decision-making exercise. Another trend began that always excites me because I like statistical methods, I like that sort of thing. In the early to mid-'60s, in an attempt, again, to bring decision-making into the classroom in an efficient way, scholars began to develop simulations. Now, they're quite sophisticated now, but they started out as probability distributions. Now, they're not all bells, right? I mean, they could be whatever they are, that would record changes in things like interest rates, availability of labor, demand for products, and have equations that would express how the profits of companies would be influenced by those sets of conditions. Okay, so now I set the scene. The businesses are teams of students, and they are required to enter decisions about various phases of their business. Policies, qualitative things, salaries, advertising budgets, name it, right? And then they are submitted, and it's like a series, in fact, it's called Monte Carlo simulation is the word, because it's like spinning a whole series of wheels of fortune, and then where they land, compared to what the business decision is what the result is that time. Over time, now I remember the first game I played at the Wharton School, the products that my partner Ed Goldstein and I were building were ABC, ambers, bells, and clanks. Not real exciting stuff. Now they're real products, the data are from real markets. Students really get excited about it. Now, as I was describing this, I don't know whether Sandra Register is back here, my assistant. You're going to hear how good assistant she is. I was describing this to her, and she said, so how do you give them a grade? Well, the way you give them a grade is the extent to which these teams have applied good business sense in finance and marketing and accounting towards their decision. It doesn't go to the team that makes the most money. That's the first thing you got to tell them. We grade on the basis of how they can articulate their strategy and how they work as a team. So I don't know whether my colleague Wayne Forrester is in the room, but he's been like a kid in a candy shop for the past few months because I sent him shopping for simulations that are out there because that's the way we're going to capstone the business programs at York College. There's another line of kind of simulations, we call them games. And they have simulation effects to them and they gather data, but they're angled at more narrow topics. We're all concerned about the state of ethical decision-making in business. That's not revolutionary. So my colleagues and I shopped around, and we came up with this simulator. Let me describe it to you, because it worked very well for us. It works in the following way. It places the students on the horns of individual ethical dilemmas that, something like it, they're very likely to be facing next year or the year after. So here's this simulator. If I told you, okay, go home, log on, and you are a junior executive in a toy company, and then you start learning things you're told about the toy industry, well, you know, viciously competitive, right? You missed the boat on one Christmas, and there's a serious problem. You learn that this is an ethical company. They make toys that are considered to be educational. You also learn that your boss, you get to see him, is kind of an old-liner. And you understand that you're in competition with about 4 or 5 other junior executives for promotion and raises, and obviously the profits that your line generates are going to have a lot to do with that. Okay? Now the fun starts. First thing is, your job is to select one of 3 different advertising campaigns for this new educational toy that your company is trying to roll out. This one is beautifully done. So you get the copy. Well, one of them is directed at children. You know, like the last line is, and I'm going to tell mommy to buy me one, right? You have children or grandchildren, Saturday morning television, right? I mean, that's okay, that's one. The other one is angled at parents. There's one in between. But you know that if you want to make money, you're going to have to sell to the kid. But if you want to maintain some ethical balance, you're going to pick one of the other 2. What are you going to do? Students don't like it because they got to make a choice. And we've got to tell them, but that's what it is. You know, ethics is about fatal choices. You can't pick a half of an ad campaign. There's a couple others, but I want to tell you one other because I rather like this one too. There's a streaming video, and you are sitting in your chair, and a colleague from the research division walks into your office and says, "Can I close the door?" Yeah, okay. And this person, kind of nervous, tells you that there's a compound in this toy that, well, there's some probability that some small percentage of children, if they touch it, could get a rash and maybe become very ill, and some may even lead to death. Goodbye. Go out the door. Okay? What do you got to do? You have to make a recommendation. So you have a person who may not be the most reliable. You have a whole series of circumstances, and they've got to make a decision. You know, we mess it up a little bit more for them, that half of the stuff is in inventory, and okay. So we've begun to do things that people said we couldn't do, and that's teach ethical decision-making. I was held to task once when there was one of these dreadful things, an alumnus at Baruch College who got dragged off to jail for insider trading. And I was asked, what did you do about it? And I said, well, when he was at Baruch College, we taught him respect for the law. What he did after that, right, is not what we can do. But we now can do better, and we can face people with ethical dilemmas. There's another one I'll tell you quickly because I love it too. It's called the beer game. You've heard about supply chains. This one we do in a room, and you actually move pieces around on boards. But you team again, and one team is the brewery, one team is the distributor, one team is a bunch of bars, and another one is local stores. And what has to happen, there's random generators again about how much they produce, how much they sell, how much they move, and they always get into fights. It's just absolutely wonderful. The distributors hate the brewery, and the brewery hates the distributors, and until maybe they figure out if they wanted to share the information, they might actually have a better supply chain. So we have a lot of fun with that. The last one is something that I'm very excited about, and I feel I have a certain amount of ownership because some of the leaders in this field are two young men who I had the privilege of teaching. It doesn't have a label yet, but I call it avatar simulation. What's an avatar? In this sense, it's cartoon face, but not The Simpsons. I mean, it's a quality cartoon face, and it's there so you can capture the emotion of the person, and the scenario is this. You are, here, you're in the person's eyes again, you are a team leader in a software development company. You've been told that your division is behind the 8 ball. You're just not getting it produced. You're just not getting it done. And you're going to have to get your people on the stick. Okay, the first avatar walks in, sits down. The way we work this out, there's going to be 3 different avatars, and each one's a different personality type. So the first one who walks in is the prototypical nerd. You know, no emotional development at all, but technical genius. And what happens is that you have a series of choices as how you begin this conversation. So if you say, Griffith, you're going to have to get on the stick here, you understand? The avatar goes, that doesn't work. What do I have to do, send you back to school? But the genius of this thing is it doesn't continue. Then I say, okay, Ivelaw, let's start over. Is it something I can help you with? You know, is there something you can tell me about what's going on? And we are able to simulate in that way an entire negative feedback interview. Now, while all this is going on, we're generating data. So when the instructor gets these folks, that's homework, right? When the instructor gets these back in class, she has a profile of what choices the interviewer made as they were going through it. By the way, in that ethics game, we have the same thing. We have a database as to who did what sorts of choices. And then as we replay it and work it back, we have an opportunity to draw the students out on what was that process. So this challenge is part of a larger thing that we take very seriously in business study, and my colleagues with me and those who couldn't make it share. I'd like to say that we're trying to infuse manageable relevance into the classroom for business. And I think we will. Thank you very much.
Sort of culminate and get the opportunity to ask questions. I'm here to speak about the intersection between general education efforts here in the new curriculum and the new school structure. And I have to say that as I prepared my contributions for today, I was struck by the idea about how change in educational structure here at York has really taken off in the last few years. There's a lot of change happening at the college. The college is on the move and changing in fundamental ways that affect the lives of faculty and students across our campus. Some of those ways are that we have record enrollment of students, with more freshman students entering the college than ever before. We have a generational shift of faculty at our college. A significant portion of full-time faculty currently at the college have been here less than 7 years. York has a plethora of new programs and majors, reflected in the fact that half the students at York College enter professional programs. And this new landscape at York also includes the organization of academic life into 3 new schools: the Schools of Arts and Sciences, the School of Business and Information Systems, and the School of Health and Behavioral Sciences. In this change, though, the ground is also shifting at York, to use a different metaphor, in ways that reflect fundamental change that's occurring across higher education in the 21st century. And in the 21st century, the knowledge we create in our classrooms and laboratories is increasingly specialized and professionalized. And the disciplinary boundaries defining what we teach and research are increasingly blurred. In this new world, students entering college are more diverse, are more technologically savvy, and more vocationally oriented than students in the past. In this new world of the 21st century, like other higher education institutions, York must increasingly respond to the demands of external constituencies, including funding agencies, accreditation bodies, accountability agents, donors, and alumni. And the college must compete with both peer and aspirational institutions for students and resources. The role of the faculty member at our college is also different in this new world. We are held more accountable for student learning. We must meet rising standards for promotion and tenure and seek external funding for our work. And we have greater service demands placed upon us. In this changing landscape, a group of faculty have been deliberating reform of York's general education requirements that have not significantly changed at York in almost 2 decades, for over a year. And as most of you know, a task force has been working on developing a new general education model, supported by a significant number of faculty across the college working in faculty inquiry groups. The general education model being discussed differs significantly from York's current general education curriculum in several ways. And the proposed curriculum tries to address many of the imperatives driving changes in teaching and learning at York and across higher education. Consequently, true general education reform at York will require new ways of thinking about the what, the who, and the how of general education. To give you a brief overview, the general education curriculum being proposed establishes the importance of helping students make connections across courses and disciplinary boundaries and between their undergraduate education and the changing world which they and we will inhabit. And thus, the general education curriculum attempts to replace the large, silo, distribution model of general education with a core of interdisciplinary, team-taught courses. The proposed general education curriculum also recognizes that York freshman students need an introduction to the expectations for college life, one that helps them build a learning community, aids their affiliation with their major and with the college, and thus we introduce and propose a freshman seminar requirement. The proposed general education curriculum also reduces the number of foundation courses and instead infuses critical abilities, written expression, quantitative literacy, information literacy, across multiple courses across the entire curriculum. Finally, the new proposed general education curriculum introduces an integrated capstone experience, providing the opportunity for students to connect their general education and disciplinary learning, and for York to assess what it means to get a York College degree from beginning to end. The organization of York's academic structure into 3 schools presents potential problems and new possibilities for imagining the what, the who, and the how of a new general education curriculum. For instance, differences that exist in the programs and requirements that sit across the 3 schools raise potential barriers for implementing a common general education. Should general education be something that all York students should have in common, regardless of a student's major or school? Or is flexibility by school necessary? Another potential problem exists in terms of general education delivery if we go with the proposed model. If the new curriculum includes interdisciplinary, team-taught core courses, this will require faculty to build and deliver curriculum across the boundaries of disciplines and departments, and now also across schools. On the other hand, discipline and department boundaries within some schools may actually be now easier for faculty to cross, because their connections are now both structurally and maybe even philosophically and pedagogically more natural. There may be even shared pedagogies, signature pedagogies that Gerry talked about, that faculty across departments and disciplines may wish to embrace as the most authentic way to teach students within that particular program or school. Organization of academic life by schools also raises new challenges and opportunities concerning who should teach general education. If general education is deemed to be an essential teaching responsibility among all faculty at all levels, and an important part of the mission of every department and program, how will this responsibility be distributed within and across schools? And will the schools support or limit this possibility? A fundamental difficulty in undertaking general education reform in this new landscape involves deciding what liberal learning all students should have in common across disciplines, departments, and schools. And if the proposed curriculum of a common set of interdisciplinary, team-taught core courses is embraced, agreeing about how to design and deliver these courses. A danger here is that we may recede into department or school loyalties and cover our eyes and our ears to the imperatives for moving York's general education into the 21st century. York's organization into 3 schools provides an opportunity for us to rethink general education and what it means to our students, to ourselves, and to our institution. Undertaking general education reform will require new habits of mind, new ways of thinking about how to address structural and cultural problems, answers to which are not immediately known. Practicing these new habits of mind has never been more important at York, where the ground is shifting and new possibilities and uncertainties abound. York's reorganization into 3 schools provides both significant challenges and new opportunities for affording interdisciplinary knowledge, for delivering a truly common general education, and for embracing our changing roles as teachers and knowledge producers in the 21st century.
I'm sure you'd agree with me that they all collectively deserve another round of applause. Now is the part for the engagement of the collective. And what I'd like to do is to invite you to pose questions, make comments, but if you're going to make a comment, try to keep the comments brief. We will have 3 or 4 questions, comments, and then we'll invite a round of responses from members of the panel. So the floor is now open for you. And by the way, there will not be a test, so feel free to engage. Questions, comments? Maria?
Sciences is that from particularly the nursing perspective, we have been using some of the methodologies and pedagogy that have been offered. And I think what we are very excited about, which is really very new to, I think, this college and nursing in general, is the simulation. And hopefully we will be getting that very soon with the new generic program, which will actually allow us to bring our students to a community setting, a medical surgical setting, psychiatric, administration, all of the levels in nursing, and have them do the critical thinking, the problem solving in a very concrete manner, and even have them videotape, develop profiles for them that they can use in resumes, inclusion, portfolios, and so forth. So I think that's something from our perspective that we're looking forward to as a new methodology, you might say, in the pedagogy of nursing.
Great, great. Go ahead, Valerie.
A comment and a question. I'm speaking from the direction, from the perspective of the English department. Of course, we have a major, 2 majors now, journalism and English, literature and language, but we also have a very large responsibility with respect to gen composition and, as long as it lasts, introduction to literature. So I was very interested in hearing Dean Rosen's comment because he was talking about business ethics. And one of the things that we incorporate in the composition curriculum, that instructors work in themes. And they have a number of themes in their textbooks. And I'm up to the business ethics theme. And we get students who are young, and they're getting younger, as they say, 18, 19 years old. So some of the cases that we select that are in the textbook, or that I select, have to do with Walmart's policy on employees not being able to date, or Pepsi-Cola employees can't date a Coca-Cola employee, because young students are
Is that
interested
for
in
real, Valerie?
dating
Is
and
that true?
relationships. No, apparently this is true, because that interests younger people. You know, things having to do with dating and sex and stuff like that, you can always get them. And you can, at that level, we can explain the difference between legality and ethics. You know, what you cannot do and what you shouldn't do. And so my question overall is, what can we do at the entry level of Gen Ed to assist in the interdisciplinary curriculum that I hear the speakers and others talking about? What can we do with students coming in early, the composition level, to assist and to prepare students for what you're going to have them do or ask them to do later on?
Good. Let's take one more question or comment, and then we'll go to the panel for a round of responses. Maybe Harry or Deb or whomever else. Ms. Finn?
Your name, please? Debra. Debra, you raised the question regarding the teaching of general education, that we need to address the question, who should teach it? I think that's raised a problem, very intrusive problem. How are we going to decide who would teach it or not?
Okay, good. So with that, let's go for a round of comments, responses from many in the panel.
You got a
Well,
tougher job than I do, I think. I think that's always the case. People at the front end of their education. I think the best assistance I could get at that level is letting students know that there is such a thing as an ethical dilemma. And there are such things as fatal choices. You either date the employee from Coca-Cola or you don't. You know, you can't date someone from Fresca and that makes it better. Joking aside, I think that there are those choices. And life has those choices in business and education and laboratory science and everything else would make our job easier, and we'd appreciate it.
I think the question I tried to formulate here was, we have to decide who is teaching Gen Ed and whether or not it's the responsibility of all faculty across all departments. That's one issue that's raised here. I think I'm raising it as a question for us to consider, as opposed to trying to formulate an answer here, as if I could. I think the other question you're raising here is about, where does knowledge that we consider important in terms of ethical development sit in general education? Should it sit in one course, or should it sit across several courses? And what's the appropriate juncture by which to address those needs? I think those are questions we're going to have to take a look at as we reform Gen Ed.
Well, I may take a stab at responding to part of your question, Ms. Finn. And I raised the question with the task force when the work first began of putting in the equation the question of who teaches Gen Ed for two reasons. Reason number one has to do with the reality as I looked at the data a year ago, the reality that 70% of our general education was being taught by adjuncts. That for me is unacceptable. Part of the reality also is that in very many departments, there is a distribution of assignment for Gen Ed and upper division courses where the junior faculty only get to bear the brunt, so to speak, of Gen Ed. There's got to be a conversation about engagement beyond the adjuncts. There's got to be a conversation with engagement of not only junior faculty teaching lower division courses, Gen Ed courses, but Gen Ed being embraced by senior colleagues as well. So that's a question, an issue I put on the table in relation to the who teaches Gen Ed. It cannot be adjuncts only, or significantly. It cannot be only left to the junior faculty who just came, and the mid-rank faculty and the senior faculty. Take the upper division courses with 10 or 12 students, and you have the junior faculty and the lecturers taking the Gen Ed courses with larger numbers of students. Questions, comments, others?
Because I haven't been as close to the Gen Ed work as I probably should be, but I'm encouraged by the challenges you lay out and the questions, and clearly they're complex. But one of the things that you mentioned we have to respond to comes at a time when we are having a conversation more broadly around what the freshman year experience should look like. And so I think that we are at the right time to engage that discussion to try to iron out the thorny issues, whatever they happen to be. And as I was sitting here, Dr. Howard mentioned that she had worked on this very project during her time, and see, she survived. And the institution has survived, and probably stronger. We have some models. As we look at this, we want to look at best practices. We don't have to go far out. We're right here in New York State, and we can look at what they did there and possibly learn from it. So I'm really encouraged by all of the complexity of the questions you raised, Debra, and look forward to helping to find solutions.
Good.
Yeah, sure.
I'd really like to encourage you to, you're asking all of the right questions and you've laid out the right issues. And at my campus, we ended up with a general education program that's now called Intellectual Foundations. But what was important is that it was faculty-led. And the faculty made the decisions. And so for the past 3 years now, all incoming freshmen are taught their first Common Core Gen Ed instruction by full-time faculty only. And they must be full faculty, no adjuncts. But the faculty committed to it, they figured it out, they worked through the schedules. And also I had to provide resources for them to retrain themselves because they had to teach across disciplines. They had to do some team teaching. The first year was very rocky. They weren't sure if they should go forward. They tried it again the second year, and now this third year, it's much, much better. We bring in about 1,600 freshmen a year. But the faculty committed to it. They published their own book for the course. They got together, and it took them about 24 months to do all of the work. But I think our students are benefiting from that model. So I did provide some resources. See, my faculty always knew how to get me to spend more money. For them to travel to visit other institutions around the country, to look at the models in depth. And so I think that's important, but having it faculty-led, I think, is what made it successful at our institution.
Thanks. You will, of course, give us the connection to your faculty there. Thank you.
Well, before we get to the next question or comment, let me just make two quick observations. One is all of this suggests the importance of faculty continuing to be engaged in the conversations about Gen Ed. In the faculty inquiry groups, in the task force sessions, please don't stay on the sidelines and complain when something is proposed. Engage. But I'd make the second point, and that is, it's not a done deal what the Gen Ed is. I hear all these rumors, but the Provost has decided, and Margaret and Debra and Vadim have decided. The conversations are still happening. We have not come to a decision point as to what the Gen Ed. So please engage and help to shape the conversations, shape the outcomes, look to see what the challenges or opportunities are from your vantage point, but let's not try to be simply parochial about your discipline. It's about the broader engagement and benefits of our students. Next sets of questions. Mespi, let's give someone else who's not as yet a chance if there is such a person. Let's have a question. The microphone will come to you.
The student representative, Jasmine, had mentioned that from a student perspective, they need more resources. And I kept, in my mind, obviously that would be financial resources, but I wanted to know, I think it would be helpful if the college knew specifically what areas or what types, give examples, spell out the type of resources that you're referring to from a student perspective.
Okay, so we'll come back to Jasmine. She mentioned one, the student union was one that she talked about, but we'll come back and hear her later on. Any other comments, questions? Linda Michelle? Linda Michelle always has a question or comment which can be.
I believe my comment is that this is the most exciting
Just give a microphone to Lynn Michelle because we want to hear what she's saying.
I can talk loud enough.
Go right ahead, Lynn Michelle. Don't let me stop you, honey.
All I can say is, if they don't get, oh, okay. I mean, I wasn't planning on saying anything, but if ever I've been excited about being a part of your college from the time I stepped foot on this campus. But I think this event has made me feel such a sense of joy and a sense of having an opportunity to impact students in ways that I didn't even know we were already doing. When I look at all of my colleagues in the different schools and hear what we're doing, I'm just amazed. I'm just honored to be a part of this institution, and I thank you all for what this means to us as an institution and as a part of this community, and the larger community. By community, I mean the global community.
Thank you. Any others? Mesfin? Use your classroom voice, Mesfin.
All right. Mine is comment directed to Lloyd. What's your name?
Jahi Rose.
All right. 3 or 4 months ago, the New York Times, I think, published an article where they took a survey of college students, and that is the economic meltdown and Obama's victory. And they found out there is a shift of major preferences from business to public health, public policy. I don't know whether you read it. Could you explain?
You know, it's a free country.
I don't mean that.
We haven't seen it here yet. Something like 25% of the new applicants are interested in studying business and finance and accounting, and we're happy to hear that. But actually, like, prompts another thing. What we're going to implement in the School of Business is a series of courses very early on that will challenge the students, and the result will be they will know whether they're going to be successful business students or not. And at an early point where if they realize they're not, because they really don't like economics. I mean, someone told them they ought to do it, but they really don't like it. You see what's around you. The world's around you, and they can get started on something that they'll prosper with and enjoy and have a great career here.
Jasmine, do you want to make any comments in addition to your mentioning the need for the student union?
Okay, well, I can focus on one area. For you said student union, or specifically of what Ms. Marsha Kenny was.
Whatever you'd like to respond. I heard you mention student union as a need when you made your initial remarks.
Well, I'll comment on both. Firstly, with Ms. Kelly, specifically in the library area, we can see that a lot of students are waiting for computers. And sometimes it can be, you know, a drag for some students that have to rush, knowing that other students might have to use the computer as well. And also, we had some technical difficulties with the copying machines that kept breaking down on us, and we had to wait on long lines to make copies of these, sarcastically speaking, thousands of papers our professors might ask us to print or bring to class. Provost Griffith, for the student union, I think that's very important because it's a better way to hear student voices. There's a lot of issues that students are addressing or want to address, but who can they bring it to without actually bringing it to the wrong person? So having a student union, we can actually hear our student voices and target the issue, target the situation to promote a better student life, a better student body, and a better college life for our students. And that's it.
Good. Lorraine?
I have a question for Professor McNeil, and it's about the plant biology question. Oh, jeez. It's about the plant biology question, and it kind of like, I'm kind of dealing with this in my own class. Do you find if you teach that way, like the inquiry approach, that they obviously they'll understand the topic better, because now they have to know well, what exactly do the parts of the plants do, and, you know, what would you need to survive in an urban environment? I love that. But you don't teach all the, you know, you don't cover all the material probably. So what's the trade-off to you? And do you find that the students are better served by learning maybe fewer topics, but really understanding them?
I want to start off by saying I haven't taught that way. I'm too afraid. It's a challenge to do it. I have not done it yet. You know, I came in as a traditionalist, so, you know, lecture, and if they can't get it, then too bad. I've changed, but it's very difficult, and there's always there's an issue with, and we're going through this with restructuring our general biology now. There's too much content for 1 year for general biology. What do? We try to pack in as much as we can. So what do we see? Students are learning very little. Okay, so is it better for the students to learn a little bit of something than, you know, be exposed to a lot but not know very much? So, yeah, I think in the upper division courses it's easier because if you're going to teach plant biology, is it absolutely necessary they learn everything about plants? I don't think so. I think you just need to pick some topics and cover them in some more detail. I think it's more important, believe it or not, I think what the students need to leave with, content isn't, to me anyway, I'm learning that content isn't the most important thing. It's how to learn, how to read something and be able to comprehend it, whether it's science or English or anything else. So content, we have to stop getting bogged down in do they know everything? We just need to, and it's a little different in general biology because our job is to give them a taste of everything so they can, so we're thinking about going to a 3-semester approach rather than a 2-semester approach, but that is an issue. But in response to that, I think, yes, they're going to probably learn a little bit less, but the hope is that they learn it better. So it is a compromise.
And I'd like to just build on what Gerry was saying, that as we think about all of our fields and the research we do every day, our fields are expanding exponentially. And if we teach our students only the content that currently exists, even if they learn all of that content that we know today, if they don't walk out the door knowing how to access information, process information, evaluate information themselves, and intellectually engage with that, then they're never going to move beyond the content understanding that they have as 22-year-olds. And that's not going to serve us very well in the future. I also would like to challenge Gerry's assessment that students hate working in groups.
Maybe it's just my students.
You got to stop giving them those flies, Gerry. You know, the flies distract them.
Students absolutely complain about working in groups. And because there's that word work as part of the phrase. So yes, they complain about it, but in the research that I've done about the course that Gerry was talking about, when students sit back and evaluate the experience, they say that they learned more, they say that they enjoyed coming to class more, they say that more classes should be structured in that way. So yes, they complain about it, but we need to listen to them in different ways than just hearing the immediate whining.
But I think initially they hate it, but they learn to either accept it or enjoy it, depending on. We always get the student that sits in the class with 55, and they're like, I'm not doing it. And so sometimes I'll go up and sit next to them and say, well, I'm not doing it either. And then eventually you kind of probe them a little bit, and then you can get them involved in a one-on-one, and then from there you can go on. But you're right. I think just like inquiry-based learning and problem-based learning, they learn to like it at the end and accept it, but the process is what they don't like.
I would just make one additional comment and that interesting, useful conversation that we're on, to say that for me, it's not a question of content or pedagogy. It's a question of how do you use the pedagogy to facilitate learning, some of which needs to be content. And at the end of the day, it raises the importance of something which we are now talking more about, and that is having learning outcomes that guide. So in the context of the outcomes for whatever course it is, what needs to be learned during that semester, and therefore how much pedagogy interface with content will facilitate a certain amount of learning. So for me, it's not an either or. It's how do you create the nexus between the two in the context of some outcomes for this course. At the end of the 14-15 week, here are some things a student would need to be taking away. Content is part of it, but it is surely not all of it. Gila, and then come back to
Just in relation to the comment about, not the comment, but the concern that class activity, group time may take some of the time of the content lecture, which is true, because if you do one thing, it always takes some time from the other component. But one thing that I do not hear here, and I think that it also reflects on some of the culture that we have here, content can also be learned out of the classroom. And I feel that the fact that it didn't come up here is because, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but sometimes we are afraid almost to tell our students that they can also learn content at home. And that class should supplement some of the difficult content, some of the questions that come later, and the activity, which is fun, because it's really boring to sit through a 3-hour class listening to a teacher. So that's something that I kind of just want to raise that question, because I do have a concern about it. I would like to have our students spend more time at home learning the content, because I think it's impossible to learn it only when they come here.
Good, good.
I mean, I think for the way Dr. Beaton did the inquiry-based process, I think a lot of the learning was done at home. It had to be done at home, because if they came back, they'd have nothing to talk about. So the idea is that they would go home, they'd figure out what they needed to know, they'd go home and learn it as best they could and find it, and then bring it back and try to integrate it. So that's...
Good, good. Lorraine?
You made a fabulous point. I loved it. And that was great. But I wanted to follow up with Gerry, just one thing. You said that you're stretching the biology to 3 semesters?
We're in the process of trying to restructure.
Well, actually, in accounting, that's exactly what we're doing right now. I just have to check with Sharon how to, rename it and credit it and stuff like that, which I am. But I think that's a great idea to realize that, we think we're teaching, but when the students come to the next class, they really don't know it. I mean, so I think we have to assess that we do have to have more learning at home, assume that our students are going to work at home, which they don't always do, and they're not always asked to. And also to say, it's okay to do something in 3 semesters that we used to do in 2, so that we can get really fundamental understanding. I think those are 2 great points.
Yeah, and I think for the lecture style, the top 1% or 5%, they don't have a problem with it. They can learn in any environment. It's the ones that aren't there. They're the ones we have to find creative ways to get them engaged, and find a way other than lecturing or in addition to lecturing to put it in a way that they can learn. So try different things and hopefully reach more of that middle group.
Of course, there's another dimension to Gila's important point, and that is that the out-of-classroom learning doesn't have to be only at home. You can take students to the museum, you can take them to sites, you can take them to the hospitals, you can take them to places where the facilitation of learning happens, but it's not in the classroom or out of the classroom, it's where else other than the classroom, one of which could be home, but does not necessarily have to be only home. Let's go to Eva, and then we'll come back to Maria.
Can you hear
We need to use the mic because we're recording some of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that there has been a huge concern of mine lately that there's a culture of treating students also as clients as opposed to treating them as professionals in training. And sometimes I wonder if what we are in need of is foundation courses in which we train them to be college students. They come many times with many demands. I'm paying for this course, so I want this. But they are not trained to be college students who assume responsibility, who go out of the classroom to learn out of the classroom. They feel upset and annoyed if we ask them to go to museums or to a play or somewhere which is not the classroom or home. So sometimes I think that besides learning as professors how to teach them and how to teach them better, we also need to teach them how to be college students so that they don't have a problem working in groups, because they come to the classroom and they still want to be isolated people who are not being trained to work in a society and a community where they will be forced to work with people. We cannot do everything from computers. We cannot do everything at 2 o'clock in the morning wearing our pajamas. We also have to go and participate in the world.
Yep.
So I think that we are in huge need of foundation courses where we learn to be better college professors and they learn to be college students so that they can move on.
Good. Let's go to Randy and then come back to Maria.
I'm from the Career Services Office, and I'm so thrilled to hear, very, very thrilled to hear that we are advocating case study as an approach to teaching our students. So it shows that we're right on point, because this is what we do in career services. We do urge our students to get involved in case study, because case study gives them an opportunity to problem solve. And it is also great for them when they put together their career portfolio. They can put their case study and they sample their case study work in their portfolio. So I'm going to be talking with you guys more about that.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Great. Maria, and then we'll go to the colleague at the back. Do we have a microphone for Maria?
I don't think that they learn less. I think they learn to synthesize. I think they learn a process for application when they get out of the college setting. I think also the concept of service learning, and I don't mean learning at the home. I think taking them outside to the community, maybe through the new nursing club, which is what I hope to accomplish, and show them how they can apply their already acquired knowledge. And I think in group, I think I'm a great proponent of the group, because I find that the nursing students, what they say in the beginning is, it's a lot of work, but they come out with, it was so much more engaging, and also the concept of leadership is embedded in that process. So I think it's about putting all of the pieces together, not just one with lecture.
I saw a hand on the other side. Mike is coming to you. 2 hands.
Thank you. My name is James Delvis, and I'm here from the community. And I was more than delighted to hear Dr. Howard again, who I view as an extraordinary educator. I'm very pleased to see and hear about the 3 new schools that York has developed, especially the School on Health. But I'd like to know more of what the School of Health is going to be about. Is it going to deal with research? We're living in a time where health is so vitally important, and here at York we're in a community where there are health research issues that really need to be dealt with. HIV/AIDS, sickle cell anemia, diabetes, etc. And I'm working with a committee at the present time who is fighting to save the Charles Drew Primary Care Center and then to develop a medical school. We'd like to see on the campus of York College, what we'd like to see is the Dr. Charles Richard Drew Medical School of Research, where we would deal with research in these diseases that are inflicting members of our community tremendously.
While the mic goes to the other colleague who had his hand up, I can just quickly comment on that question to invite you to speak with the dean, the acting dean of the School of Health and Behavioral Sciences, Dr. Dana Fusco. But I would make the observation that we're hoping to extend the research engagement that is already happening in all of the schools. It's not that health and behavioral sciences is the only school that will be expected to do research. There is a significant amount of research happening in all of the various departments and schools. The idea is how to extend that, how to build connections between and among faculty doing research, but please speak to Dane Fosco. She can give you more about the School of Health and Behavioral Sciences.
I read the study about the performance of the students and the ratio of the full-time faculty and adjunct faculty, how they related to. And I don't remember the source, but the conclusion was that obviously the better performance and more graduating students comes from the colleges where the full-time professors are majority. So the adjunct obviously adjunct don't have enough time to prepare the lecture and don't have enough experience to lecture and bring the performance of the students. But the other things, well, I have some observation also and practice with this case study. It was mentioned several times here. In many colleges, the course is led in 3 ways. One is the lecture, strictly this orthodox traditional lecture. The second part of the course is sort of the classroom with the students' activities. And the third part is the manual, especially in science, when they perform some experiences. Plus, additional to that, is given at the beginning of the course, is given the assignment for one or group of students as the project, as the study, group study or individual study. And at the end of the semester, they present to the class and also to the professor leading the course the result of the study. And sometimes, and very often, this is very valuable result and sometimes even published as the good case of good scientific work. So maybe we should, I've been teaching in Europe and in the United States, and I haven't seen those triple or multi-tracks teaching in my experience here in the United States. So maybe I will just suggest this as a consideration.
We do some of that. For instance, we have a comparative physiology course taught by Dr. Margaret McNeil. She does case studies as a correlative to the lecture, and she does do wet lab experiments in the lab portion that are designed that the outcome relative, and they do a project that starts at the beginning that the students develop that goes through the semester, that they either give presentations or poster sessions at the end in front of the other students. So there are some examples of that where all those things are integrated. Lecturing, case studies, doing an independent project related to the topic throughout the semester, and doing known experiments throughout the semester that actually teaches them the process of hypothesis-driven experimentation. So, but there needs to be more of it.
Thanks, Jerry. Good. Let's just take 2 final comments, questions, if there are any, and then I'll invite the members of the panel to make any parting observations they'd like. Any two final comments, questions? Doris?
Of evaluating over a period of time any changes that you see or trends that are seen and using these tools. I must say that when I was in school, I might have liked science a lot better if we had done some of the things that you did. But, and also, since your college is now having a higher level of GPA and the academic requirements, is that making a difference in the way or how you can use this, this new?
Good question. I'll answer the first question to say yes, evaluation is important. Assessment is one of the things that not only our faculty and institution are taking stronger interest in, it is, as Dr. Howard said, part of the national landscape. You just can't be comfortable doing it. You've got to assess how it's happened and what might be benefits of doing it differently or better in the next iteration. But I'll be interested in hearing members of the panel respond to that question. Is the increased preparation being seen in what you teach, and is it making a difference? Let's take one final question, and then we'll come to the panel for final comments, if they're ready. So let's start with Gerry for final thoughts.
For us, it's too early to tell, but just by interacting with the students, especially in gen ed courses that I'm teaching, trying to incorporate some of this, the engagement and less bitterness I can see on a daily basis. And, you know, the GEP thing that I've been doing, I think, you know, for the few students that I've had, I think I've had about 10 or so, they really don't like it in the beginning, but they really like it at the end, and they've come back after graduation and telling me how, you know, it was a good exercise. So I think we'll learn more about it as we go. But one of the things to do with changing pedagogy is it's really hard to do. And the only way you can really make strides is if you have colleagues in your department that go along with it and are willing to try. And I'm fortunate that in biology, it's the congeniality is excellent, and people are willing to try because the students don't like it, and it's learning for the faculty and it's learning for the students. They have to learn how to perform in that environment. So for faculty that are untenured, for instance, you know, it can have an effect on your student evaluations, for instance. If you do this, give the student evaluations later as you can, because they get happier and happier. So I just wanted to point out that it's not an easy thing to do, and it's much more helpful if everyone gets on board, and that's the case in my department, which I'm grateful.
Good. Leslie?
I think one of the really exciting things about today has been hearing about what happens in other departments and other schools, and I think that there's a remarkable amount of innovation going on at York, and hopefully the school structure will allow us to share and learn about what's happening and how we can grow from each other rather than just happening into an experience. And I think I would love to go into some of these business classrooms and see how the simulations work and see is there a way that we can bring that kind of simulation experience in the teacher education program. And as far as the question about assessment of the impacts of pedagogies, I've been talking to a couple colleagues in biology about could we do a combined research project looking at how we're affecting learning in larger lecture classes and bring our different expertise to that experience.
Jasmine?
I wanted to say the exposure to group interaction in every classroom in different department is important, and I believe it is effective for a college student to have an effective college life.
Great. I didn't address your question about does larger numbers of full-time faculty as opposed to adjuncts make a difference in the retention and ultimately graduation? The answer is yes. And that is why, in part, President Keyes took the decision a while back that we need to aggressively increase the number of full-time faculty we hire. Not only for the gen ed, but also one of the things that is known that makes a difference in retention and graduation is mentoring. We don't pay adjunct faculty to mentor. Mentoring is a function of what faculty who are full-time can do. One of the things that makes a difference in retention and graduation is undergraduate research. We don't pay adjuncts to do research. Many of them do engage their students in research, but that's because of their own vocational interests. So the value that full-time faculty bring is significant value not only to the instructional effort. It's not that we undervalue what adjuncts do. Adjuncts have critical value. But when you ask what is their portfolio of responsibilities vis-a-vis success of students, their portfolio of responsibilities is a limited one. They cannot give the kind of added value to ensure that the retention, a function of which is mentoring, the retention, a function of which is engaging in research, that value is there. Harry?
Yeah, thank you. I was really excited by the question that I got from our colleague in the English department, because this dean, anyway, is a great supporter, great valuer of general education. Business takes place in a culture, in a society. It requires communication. It requires analysis. And most of you folks have the tough job of laying that foundation that my colleagues can build on. And that's how I view it, and that's how we're going to treat it. And I'm pleased to have that challenge.
Great. Deb?
I think what I take away from today is that clearly there is a lot of innovation going on at York College. But when we're talking about general education, it's not enough to have innovative ideas. You also need to ask good questions. And so I take heart in the fact that our speaker suggested, at least, that we're asking good questions and that we need to continue to do so.
Good. Let's give the round of applause to the panelists up here. All that remains for me to do are three things. To thank you, give yourselves a round of applause. Realize I like to have people applaud themselves. But I also want to, secondly, thank the people who helped to make today happen. Michelle Hodge and the colleagues in the Project Management Office. Joanne Bob, Sandra, and other colleagues in the Provost Office. The people at Cullen Art, the people in marketing, Assistant Provost Henke, who helped to do so many of the things that helped to make today possible. President Keyes' office for arranging for Muriel Howard to be here. We thank you and your team for making this possible. My final act is to invite you to be part of other events this week and in coming weeks. Tonight we have the beginning of a partnership with the Jamaica Hospital, where the Director of Community Medicine will be giving a talk on H1N1 right in this room at 6 o'clock. If you have a chance to be there, please come and be part of it. Tomorrow we have the Executive Leadership Breakfast right in this room at 8 o'clock. Please feel free to join if you'd like. We also have tomorrow in the Performing Arts Center a fabulation, followed by a conversation with Lynn Nottage. And then to round off the 5-day week, the official 5-day week, right in this room again, we have the Aviation Speaker Series with a variety of colleagues talking about issues of aviation and transportation management. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful day.